Welcome to this morning's webinar where we're going to talk about localism, the Localism Act and what has really changed since the Act came in 2 years ago. Just want to start by saying thank you very much for joining us and I am Nyree Ambarchian, so I lead on Athene's community engagement work. My background is in delivering community engagement and consultation programmes. I've been with Athene for about 3 years. Before that, I was helping environmental charities to deliver frontline community engagement projects. And also I worked for Royal Haskoning, which is a firm of engineers and environmental scientists, on helping them deliver successful engagement and consultations for onshore and offshore wind, which is always interesting because it's so controversial. I also have Louise Harrison here. Louise works on community engagement projects at Athene with me. If you have questions throughout this morning's webinar, Louise is the lady to email and her email address should be on screen now. Do ask questions throughout, please do interrupt. Just a little bit about Athene before we get started. So we started up about 10-11 years ago. And we began life as a PR communications marketing company. One of our clients, EDF Energy, asked us to help with the communications for a programme of new nuclear development. And we realised that we'd found a little niche in the market around this community engagement stuff. And that actually it is communications, but it's communications of a certain form and needs doing in a certain way to get it right. Since then, we've taken this specialism in community engagement and applied it to a host of different projects across housing, energy, infrastructure, industrial, retail, all kinds of projects. Some of our clients you can see on screen now, they range from Warwick Energy, Viridor, Royal Haskoning, the Longhurst Group, Forestry Commission, Accent Neen. So we have quite a broad client base. Wherever there's development that is going to have an effect on communities and on stakeholders, that's where our services are drawn upon. And just to give you a bit of background, we helped deliver the community consultation for what was at the time the UK's largest energy from waste facility in Runcorn. We also helped one of our clients to deliver a really successful community consultation programme for the UK's largest solar farms at Wathamswold in Leicestershire. And as well as that, we've worked on the UK's longest buried cable for an offshore wind farm that spanned 45 kilometres, and we delivered the community engagement for that project. So that's a little bit about us and our work and I guess our experience. But what I want to talk to you about this morning is 2 years on from the Localism Act to look at what's really changed, what do you need to be aware of. And at the time when the Localism Act got royal assent in November 2011, there were lots of questions about how its central policy driver around putting power in the hands of local people would sit against a seemingly opposing policy driver, which was in the NPPF, in the National Planning Policy Framework, this presumption in favour of sustainable development. And 2 years on, I would love to be able to say to you that it's really clear how these two policy drivers sit now, but that would not be true. It's still unclear, it's still emerging, there's still a lot of interpretation on a case-by-case basis. But what is clear is that there's a real sense of a change in the perception of local people around their right to be engaged with and consulted with and their right to help shape development. And I will come back to that. So I wanted to cover pick out a few bits from the Localism Act just to go through specific things that have changed and that you need to be aware of if you're bringing forward schemes for development. The first of all is the compulsory requirement for pre-application consultation for some types of development. I should stress it's not all. And there's always been, for large infrastructure projects, there's always been that requirement for pre-application consultation. But the Localism Act made that requirement apply to more projects, and there was some guidance in the Localism Act about what size development, what type of development that would apply to, but actually that guidance never became the secondary legislation that we were expecting. And what's actually happened is that it's been adopted differently depending on the local planning authority in question, and really varies from planning authority to planning authority. And the key thing is to start with the local authority's statement of community involvement to see what the requirements are. The Localism Act did also bring into force powers for the local planning authority to require pre-application consultation where they felt necessary, even if within their own documents it wasn't specifically required. If they feel that it's a particularly controversial scheme or that local people really ought to be consulted, they can require it of a developer. The other thing that's changed that's really relevant for today is changes around the rules on predetermination. So this is the rules around whether councillors can engage proactively with developers around a scheme that's being proposed, and also whether they can give an opinion on the development in question. And previously, giving an opinion would have meant they forfeited their right to be able to vote on a scheme. But that is no longer the case. And the specific wording that was released around the time of the Localism Act was that the aim was to end the absurd situation where councillors are prevented from acting on local issues because of the risk of challenge that they are biased. So the aim is to ensure councillors can actively engage with developers and communities around planning applications. They can meet with developers and community representatives and express an opinion without forfeiting their right to vote on a decision. And when we saw this, we were really pleased because it's great to be able to engage key stakeholders at a really early stage and chat through with them the proposals and the kind of thinking behind the proposals. We were hoping that it would make councillors much more willing to engage early. And I think this has definitely been the case in some places that we've worked, but in others it just hasn't filtered down yet. And some local planning authority guidance for councillors still remains that they should not engage early with developers and they should not give an opinion. But it's useful to know that actually those rules have now moved on. And we would always recommend speaking to certainly ward councillors and other stakeholders at an early stage if you're thinking about bringing forward development in a particular area. The final thing I wanted to quickly talk about today about the specific things that have changed because of the Localism Act is around the powerful suite of neighbourhood planning tools that communities have been granted around neighbourhood plans and around neighbourhood development orders. And these are being I've got a slide shortly that will kind of cover how these are being adopted, but they are quite detailed planning documents. And I think one thing that's only just filtering through is the fact that these powerful tools are A, not easy to come by, and B, are not meant to stop development. They are really about shaping development, changing development, and more development rather than a tool to stop development. This is a slide that from DCLG, the Department of Communities and Local Government. We work quite closely with them. They gave us an update a couple of months ago on how neighbourhood planning is being adopted in different parts of the country. As you can see, the number of plans that have been actually adopted and are kind of in force as policy it's only 3 at the moment, and this is testament to the fact that this is a real process. It's a technical process. It requires real thought, and the number of applications to designate areas for neighbourhood planning is really promising. So there's a strong pipeline of communities that are looking to do neighbourhood planning. So it's 727, and this may well have gone up by now. This is a couple of months old now. So the key thing is that neighbourhood planning and these neighbourhood planning tools are being adopted, and that's the kind of pipeline showing the progress of adoption. Within this world of localism, how do you make sure that the pre-application consultation and engagement that you're doing is fit for purpose within the new rules? Well, we've developed a 7-stage process which I'm more than happy to share with you here today. This process has been developed by looking at the Localism Act's requirements and also looking at the statement of community involvements that local authorities have updated as a result of the Act. And the process begins really with understanding the community. And the key thing with this whole process is that it can be scaled up and scaled down depending on the size, type of development that you're looking to promote. For a large-scale, perhaps controversial development, we would recommend a full community audit, which is desk-based research that looks into the community's hopes, aspirations, fears. Have there been traffic accidents that perhaps the planning process wouldn't pick up, that you need to be aware of before you go into an exhibition? Have there perhaps been kind of issues in the background about who's really in charge? This is something we look at quite closely in a community audit. So you've got the people who are voted in to be in charge, but who are the people influencing them? Where are the decisions really made? And what makes this community tick? What is it that makes them tick? For a smaller scale development or something perhaps less, where you're expecting less controversy, you can do a community scan, which is very similar. It's desk-based research, but it's just slightly less detailed than a full community audit. But that community audit or scan will form part of your evidence base to show that you have taken the time to understand the community in which you're trying to develop. And that could be put as an appendix in your statement of community involvement. We take that desk-based research and we look specifically at what does that community need? What are their aspirations? What physical capital things do they need? Is there a way that your development could help them achieve the things that they want? And that might be on a local authority level, things that your development might be able to do to fit the strategic goals of the local authority. Or it might be really specific to the community. Is there a village hall that needs solar panels on the roof, for example? Is there something you could do to build in community gain and really target what you're doing to make sure it does benefit the local area? And this just means that you can go into meetings prepared with a real understanding of the community, and you can pitch your proposals in a way that is going to help the community see that you've really tried to build in benefit for them, and it's not just a kind of it's tailor-made. It's not just a general community benefit that you roll out for everyone. It's kind of based on their local area, and that can do wonders. Just people don't expect it, and can mean you have a much more positive response. We take both those bits of work and we build a community engagement strategy. And this is where we say, okay, based on our understanding of the local area, we suggest 2 exhibitions in these venues. We suggest promotion that includes press releases, a website, because the local area has a high level of online web literate users. We design a process of community engagement and meaningful consultation that fits that local area. This is your strategy, and that sits behind the scenes. That's an internal document. But we take a public version of that document, which is shorter with less detail, which sets out what you're aiming to do, how you're going to consult, and specifically what activities you're going to deliver. And that's your statement of community engagement, and can be published on your website so that people can know what to expect. But also, one thing we do is we get the local planning authority to approve it. Similarly, as you would request a scoping opinion for an EIA, we request an opinion on the statement of community engagement, on the kind of strategy. And the local authority will typically look at it and perhaps add another event or add some more stakeholders that you need to engage with. But it's just about demonstrating and evidencing that dialogue and that willingness to get it right. We then get on and deliver the strategy. So we deliver the promotion, we do the press releases, we manage the media, we would run the exhibitions or whatever it is, the events that you're doing. And then, of course, importantly, gather and analyse the responses, the feedback that have been given, and that will form the basis of your statement of community involvement that gets submitted as part of your planning application. The key thing there is taking the responses and, where possible, building suggestions, ideas into the scheme and changing it wherever possible. But where it's not possible, and this is the 7th point on this chart, feeding back to the community about why it was not possible to take their comment or a particular comment on board. I think there's a real lack of understanding between communities and developers about each different side, and I think that communities don't understand how developers work, and the fact that a scheme needs to be viable, and some of the suggestions that they might make would mean it's not viable. And I think it's really important to feed back to the community about what changes you have managed to take on board and what changes you haven't, and explain why. Now, that's the stuff you have to do. That is a process that's fit for this world of localism, to demonstrate meaningful engagement and effective consultation and dialogue. But what we're increasingly finding is that, as well as doing all that stuff that you have to do, there's a real reason for you to, as the old marketing saying goes, sell the sizzle, not the sausage. And this is about taking the benefits of your scheme and packaging them up and communicating them. So it's not just new houses, it's new houses that are really good quality, specifically built for older people, and will bring X number of new jobs and a still contribution to the area. Taking the benefits and communicating them in a way that local people understand. So you get to your exhibition, public exhibition in the local village hall, and you say to the angry crowd of residents, I know you don't want the extra traffic or the view changing, but do you realise that we've built cycle paths into this scheme? It's also going to mean tax revenue for the council of X number of £1 million. Plus, there's a new primary school built in. There, now aren't you excited about it? And what happens? You still get shouted at. And the reason is that the benefits that you're selling are not appealing to the people you're selling them to. Those residents that come to a public exhibition probably already have a job, they probably already have a house that they're perfectly happy with, and they just don't want the kind of benefits that your development's going to bring to the area. Even the nicest sausage isn't appealing if you're not hungry. And this is really about thinking about the audience that we're communicating these benefits to, because although the residents surrounding the scheme perhaps will not be enticed by great quality housing or new jobs, because they're not buying what you're selling in that respect. Actually, there are people who might be interested, and where you might be able to build engagement and potentially support. And thinking beyond the kind of norm, you probably have to do a public exhibition because it's probably in the local authority's statement of community involvement requiring it. But actually, and for not a great deal extra work, could you take that exhibition that you've just delivered in the village hall to the school gates a few miles away and talk to perhaps young parents who have got young families that they're thinking about future housing needs over a 20-year period? Where are their youngsters going to live when they've grown up? Is it about engaging the business community and estate agents? Is there a way that you can think more creatively about the people that might be buying the sizzle of your development that you are selling beyond the kind of norm? And this is something that we've been encouraging our clients to do for a number of years, but a few months ago the RTPI brought out a report which reinforced this view, and it's always nice when a body like the RTPI come out in favour of something that you've been trying to get across for a while. And their second recommendation, this report was about delivering large-scale housing and unlocking development. And their second recommendation was around making sure that community engagement reaches a wider cross-section of the community, including potential future residents, and thinking more laterally about who you're trying to engage with your development and where you might find pockets of support and mobilise that kind of silent majority. And we did this quite successfully for one of our clients, Peterborough Garden Park. This is a retail centre in Peterborough, and they wanted to give people more reasons to visit the park, and so decided to embark on gaining consent for a new supermarket on the site. And here in this picture you can see our client in the middle, and on one side Brian from the local disability forum, who was a key group that we engaged with proactively as part of the consultation to make sure that the proposals were really suitable for people with disabilities. And on the other side, Councillor Bella Saltmarsh, who is the ward councillor for the area, and they are delivering 1,000 postcards of support for the supermarket to the town hall, to the planners. And this, we delivered the public consultation and engagement for the supermarket, but we also delivered a programme of building community support. And we did that by making it easy for people to engage, so taking things to them. So we had a postcard which was pre-printed with suggestions on why people might want to support the scheme. We engaged customers of the garden park, so people who are already friendly to the scheme, to the centre, to the business. And we also engaged people in the surrounding areas. And the key thing there was we helped our client build in more areas of benefit for the local community, tailored to them. So we know that the environment is a really strong agenda in Peterborough, so we built in a cycle hub. We know that the area around the supermarket is in need of development in terms of skills, so we built in a skills hub. And by helping to tailor the plans to incorporate real community gain, tailored to that area, we were able to get people on board. The key, once you've got that support and you've got that evidenced support, is what you then do with it. We wrote a report on the support that we'd had, the 1,000 postcards, a number of letters of support from stakeholders, and we took that report, we sent it to all local councillors, which of course would include those sitting on the local planning committee. We also spoke to the ward councillors, and this is the key thing. You get that support. If you can find those pockets of support for a scheme, you then need to show the decision makers that that support is there, because you will still have the opposition. And this is not about closing down the opposition or getting too distracted by it. It's really about showing the decision makers that there is another point of view out there of their constituents that they need to listen to and take notice of. And it allows, rather than them only hearing a very vocal minority voice, it allows them to hear another voice and adjust their decision making accordingly and justify their decision making accordingly. This kind of approach of looking for ways to build in community gain and rewarding communities that host development is really importantly coming through in emerging policy from the government. And we've seen this most recently in fracking, where developers are required to put up front on the table the benefits that communities hosting fracking will get. The same applied to onshore wind, so the policy that came out from DEC, where communities hosting renewable energy developments, they play accepting that they play an important part in meeting a national need, and as such being upfront with the benefits that they should get from the development. And this happens a lot, this kind of community benefit stuff, but it often happens after planning permission is given. And we think that not only can you help build support, but communities should be able to benefit from the development that they're hosting. And being upfront about that early on shouldn't be seen as buying planning permission. It should be seen as something that could be discussed with the community at an early stage, because we appreciate that there will be impacts from the development and they are hosting the development, so there should be some benefits. Putting that on the table early rather than later can really help build support and build common ground. And does all this make any difference if you package up the benefits of your scheme in the right way, if you sell them to the right people and you build in that community gain? Does it really make a difference? Well, on the one hand, no, you'll still have opponents, they will still oppose, and vocally no doubt, and particularly those directly affected by your proposals. But it does, on the other hand, create the opportunity to engage the silent majority and create what our MD at Athene calls the skateboard park moment. And this is based on development that was taking place in his village, and it was going to build. It was for new homes, so there were impacts around traffic. But his children were really excited about the development proposals because on the table early was the suggestion that a skateboard park would be built if the planning permission was given. And in this kind of skateboard park moment means that you take people who perhaps are indifferent or who could be swayed either way. It gives them a reason to say, actually, I don't mind this development. It gives them a reason not to oppose when a petitioner comes knocking on their door asking for them to sign an opposition petition. It gives them a reason not to oppose, and it gives them a reason to look at the benefits, focus on the benefits, and understand that there might be something in it for them. That's the kind of presentation that I wanted to give you. I am here to take questions. Please send your questions through. The key thing for today is to bear in mind that the Localism Act, a lot of things still remain uncertain, but the thing that is certain is that communities, councillors, residents' perception of their right to be engaged with and their right to be consulted with and their right to help shape development in their area is more prevalent and is something you definitely need to be aware of. The other thing is that increasingly there is a need to look beyond the usual suspects and the tick box exercise to build support for your scheme and think creatively about how you're communicating the benefits and specifically to who. To understand that you are probably going to get a bit of a bashing at an exhibition perhaps because the people who come to an exhibition are the people who are not going to see the benefits in what you're doing, but perhaps you could do a little bit more work, not a lot of extra work, but a little bit more work to build that support and mobilise that silent majority. And then also to think about putting on the table a package of community benefits earlier, at an earlier stage, rather than waiting until the planning application has been given. And this is the way that government policy is increasingly taking us. Thank you very much for your time today, and do get in touch if you've got any questions or if you'd just like a chat. Thank you.